Good evening, everybody. Welcome to Courtroom Insider. It is already Wednesday, halfway through the month. Today is August 13th. So glad you're with me tonight. Doing some interesting follow up interviews today, all thanks to you. Every question tonight comes from you, our viewers, and I appreciate the fact that our audience is so engaged because we've had some really interesting guests lately, in my opinion. And when I've asked you to send in questions, boy, you don't disappoint. So we're going to get to those in just a minute. I want to thank you for being here tonight, and please, if you have any questions tonight, feel free to put them in the comments and let us know where you're watching from. Our first interview. Portia Louder. Do you remember we had her on last week? If you missed it, you can go back and watch it. She is the mother out of Utah who was found or pleaded guilty to mortgage fraud. This was quite an elaborate operation back in the mid 2000s, right before the housing bubble burst, where she was dealing with hundreds of thousands of dollars and doing transactions that were, she thought, okay, but turns out they were illegal. And she was turned in and ended up being sentenced to 7 years in federal prison. She had a 3-month-old baby at home the day the FBI came to her door. And she served 5 of those years, five and a half, I believe. And she has since turned her experience into a mission, I guess you could say, into helping women who are in prison and to kind of spreading the message that no matter what happens in your life, things can get better. Well, after that interview, during that interview, many of you sent in questions. You wanted me to ask Portia. And so we caught up a little earlier today, and I'm gonna roll that now. And then after Portia, Brad Bradley is back. He's the brother of Amy Bradley, the woman who vanished on the cruise ship back in the 90s. A lot of you had questions for Brad, and he's here to answer them all. So first, let's start with Portia. All right, Portia, I'm just going to go through all of these questions we got from people. First one, please explain in simple terms how you got in trouble. Every time you sold a house or lot, you received 100,000 and the buyer got 500,000. Did I understand this correctly? Please help.
Okay. So this is so confusing that it's hard for me to even get my arms around it. And it kind of evolved. The goal was for the investor who was purchasing the home to get the cash back. And a mortgage broker came up with a concept of basically buying the home with hard money and then refinancing the home to get the equity out. And so what I did is facilitated all of those pieces. There were times that I made $100,000 and there were times that I lost $100,000. My fee was when I locked up the home at a certain price and the investor came in and bought it at a higher price. Once they got that refinance and they got their cash back, I would get a percentage of that cash back that they got. So if the seller sold it for 1,500,000 and they got a loan for 2.1, they would get 500 back and 100,000 would come to me. But that didn't happen until the home was refinanced and the final loan took place. And I don't know if that explained it very well, but that's what happened. So.
A follow-up question. Someone wanted to know, one, have the laws changed since then? And two, how did you get involved, like in the very beginning stages? How did you get introduced to all of this?
So the initial thing that happened to me was that two investors reached out to me, actually thinking that I was the different Portia, a Portia bunker who was a hard money lender, and wanted to know if I would lend money on one of these types of deals, the hard money, which is kind of the high interest. An investor comes in and closes it fast. And when I met with them, I said, I don't have hard money to lend. I was just buying lots and flipping lots. And then I said, well, help me understand what you're doing. And they presented it that they had this home that was worth a lot more that I could buy it for less money, right? And the way that I understood it was, well, why aren't you selling it for more? Like if the home is worth $3 million, why are you selling it for 1.5? It seems like you could sell it for 3 million. And they said, no, that's not what it is. The home appraises for $3 million. So it has all this cash that you can pull out of it. Basically, it's like arbitrage. It's what banks do. You borrow for less and you turn around and use that money for other things. And it was hard for me to get my arms around it completely. Um, I didn't get involved on that particular deal. Then they came and showed me another deal. And at that point, I had a lot of my own lots that were locked up in hard money payments. And so I thought, I'll just do this for myself and I'll pull this cash out and use it in these other investments. But when I closed it, I couldn't get the cash out. It was too hard. And so I went to a mortgage broker and he said, look, if we structure it a different way, it will be easier to get the money out. So it was kind of an evolving process. And as far as the laws changing, um, it wasn't legal then, so it's not legal now.
Oh.
I went to prison. The things that are illegal about it are that, first of all, anything that you state on an application. So if you state you're going to move into the home and don't, that's a fraud. If
Mm.
you state your assets higher than they are, that's a fraud. If you say that there's so many ways that fraud can take place in those types of deals. What isn't illegal is if you buy a home and it appraises for more than you paid for it, you can go pull the cash out of it, right? But it depends on a lot of other factors. And so I didn't think it was illegal then. I hear there's people that are doing it now
Mm.
that it's illegal, but according to the federal government, it is.
It is.
So.
Okay. I appreciate Portia's courage in sharing her story. I'm wondering if the criminal activity bled into other aspects of her life, like your photography business. Did any of your customers become victims and have they been taken care of?
That's a good question. I had somebody reach out to me on Instagram and said, when you started going through, you photographed my wedding, but it wasn't actually you. You sent somebody else. I hired you, and it was devastating for me because of what you were going through. Like I was under federal investigation. And so I don't even remember the circumstances around it, but she said it really was such a terrible experience for me to have basically my integrity so weak that in the situation that I was in, I ended up sending another photographer to photograph the wedding for me. So I think my clients, especially at the end of my career as a photographer, were affected, and that's something that I deeply regret. Um, I apologized to her publicly, and then she and I had some conversation behind the scenes, and she said, I really appreciate where you're at now, and what I would like you to do is pay it forward. Like any chance you get to do something for somebody else in that photography realm, which I have done. I have a camera, and I kind of do a lot of service work now, but it definitely affected other aspects of my life, and just my integrity in general was weak at that point.
Yeah. What was a typical day like behind bars in prison?
So my typical day, it really depends on the person. The institution is very structured. So they have like certain count times. The meals are the same every single day. So like Monday would be hamburger day, Tuesday taco day, Wednesday fish day. Those aren't the exact things we have, but every day you get the same food. And the door is open at the same time every day. In fact, it gets to the point where if anything changes, let's say there's a institution problem and they lock you down, everybody gets really uncomfortable because we're so used to that structure.
Mm.
For me, my day went like this. I was up every day by 4:30 or 5 a.m., jumped in the shower, and then as soon as they opened the door, I was out of the unit. I would go to the kitchen and get whatever they had to eat, and then try to find a place either in the rec yard, somewhere where I could get away from everyone else because it was quiet in the morning. So there weren't a lot of other people that were up that early, and that was like my alone time. I did a lot of reading, wrote my goals, pretty structured. I wrote classes and other things when I was there. I walked a lot every chance I could. In federal prison, you can be outside more than state prison. So there was like a tree there that I would just go sit under that I really appreciated. And then they do have classes and there's also jobs. Everybody in prison works. I found a job that worked for me. My job was working in reentry because it gave me meaning. But
Mm.
there are like factory jobs that pay a little bit more. My job paid $7 a month, so it wasn't much.
A month.
But a
Wow.
month, yeah. But it was more for quality of life for me. Like I appreciated the work that I was doing. So it's very structured. Usually by 10:30, you go back to the unit, everyone gets called back, you get counted again, then you can go to lunch. And then they do this every hour, there's a 10-minute move. So you're locked wherever you are for an hour, and then for 10 minutes, you can move from one building to another. And by the end of the day, I think they feed us dinner at 5:30, and then I would go to the rec yard again and walk. And it's just kind of the same thing day after day. And then by 9, they do count and they turn the lights off. And that's when some of us go to bed and others stay up late, making a lot of noise. That's kind of how
Right.
it.
And I would imagine every facility is different. Some prisons are run completely different. Maybe.
Yeah, there's a lot of structure. So the federal system is all run by the Bureau of Prisons. It's like one big organization. State prisons have different, they each have it different. So there's lot of the policies are similar in federal prison, but There are some variants from prison to prison.
Were you
So
able to get like a tablet? I don't know if they did it that back then to watch movies on or have a TV.
no, they don't have that at all in federal prison. In state prison, they can get tablets and they can buy a TV and they have to use headphones. In federal prison, they have TV rooms, and I stayed out of those for the most part because there's people that would argue in there over what to watch. The other thing that I noticed was the people that were sitting in there watching TV, week after week, year after year, I felt like they were kind of stuck. And so I just thought, man, if I go in there and spend 3 years watching TV, I'm going to come out with nothing. So I just avoided those things because I could see people that spend a lot of time in there weren't really progressing the way that I wanted to progress. So.
Interesting. I hope this isn't too personal, but what type of effect did this have on your marriage? Did you guys ever talk about divorce? I can't imagine having my wife in prison in another state for 5 years.
No, it's not too personal. In fact, I just dropped a podcast episode with my husband talking about that.
Oh,
So
okay, good.
I'll have to check it out because he hasn't shared his story like I have. Um, so it was very, very difficult, especially the years of the federal investigation. Chad was really depressed. He was confused and overwhelmed, and this is way out of his comfort zone. He's a pretty conservative guy. So at one point I told him, let's just get divorced. Like this is too hard for you. And I'm sick and tired of feeling, this was before I went to prison. I'm sick and tired of feeling the weight of this. And I can never make it right. It's just too much. And he took a couple of days to think about it and basically told me, said, I love you and I'm all in. Like I could even do better. There's areas that I can support you better in. And I'm not a victim. Like I married you and we went down this path. He's like, I didn't know everything that was going on, but nonetheless, I'm standing by you. So he made that decision, and I really respect him for it. Like, Chad doesn't really live his life by his emotions as much as he does his decisions. The day that I was sentenced, I already knew that he would stand by me. Like, we had already made that decision. And when I got to prison, I called him and said, you should leave me. Like, I just said, there is no way that you should have to wait. And a lot of his family told him to as well. And again, he said, I love you and I'll stand by you. And so it wasn't easy, but this is what I know. We grew together through it. Like we wrote letters back and forth, and we were both very faithful to each other and faithful to the promises that we made to ourselves and each other. I think my husband, his choices says a lot more about his integrity than anything else. Like he made a decision to stand by the promises that he made, and it has blessed our children and our family in such a profound way because our children really admire and respect him. He didn't ever talk bad about me. My children are like, Dad was always so supportive of you. So he's a pretty extraordinary person for making those decisions.
And he never served any time, right?
No, no, he was indicted and they gave him home confinement, which didn't matter because he was home with the kids and he was working from home at the time. So,
Okay.
yeah.
Uh, you talked about this one. Have the laws changed since you were convicted? Could this type of thing happen again today? You addressed that one. Have you
But I
found?
will say this, I get a call or I get an email and a message at least 3 or 4 times a week of people saying, we're doing this. Is it the same? And it probably is. Just don't do it.
Mhm.
Like, yeah, I mean, there's people out there, real estate, there's always going to be this hustle. I hear that it's happening again. So I would be steer clear of anything that feels wrong. And if there's anything that's misrepresented on an app, or if the lender isn't fully aware, or if it doesn't pass the test, if you think that anyone looking at it, it would look funky, then stay away from it,
Yeah.
So.
Did you ever find out who turned you in? Like who tipped off the feds?
So I do know that there was a realtor, and I know his name. I mean, I'm happy to say it doesn't really matter to me. He and I discussed it. His name was Mark Wilkinson, and he was doing a lot of high-end real estate stuff in Utah at the time, and was kind of frustrated because I was in the same realm and I wasn't using him. At one point, he approached me and asked me if I was interested in working with him as a realtor. I wasn't. And then he started calling the Division of Real Estate, and then they went to the FBI.
Oh,
So,
wow.
yep.
Have you found it hard to get a job given that you have a felony on your record? What about your husband? If he has a felony on his record, how do you support the family?
Yeah, it was. So for me, the way that I chose to deal with it was just 100% in the open. And when I came home, I was fortunate because I had family in the photography industry. So I got a job doing that. And then I went to work in drug treatment. And so I kind of considered my experience an asset, if you will. I felt like because I had been through what I'd been through, I could help relate. I mean, I could relate to other people in those situations. And I've worked in those industries, and people have been very supportive of me. Um, my husband, it was different for him. He worked for his brother for a while and they knew him, so that wasn't a problem. But when he went out into the regular workforce, he got a job. His felony is so long ago, it doesn't show up in his record.
Mm.
They did a search and they offered him the job and then they rescinded the offer because he works in accounting, which is really hard to get a job with a fraud charge, right? He interviewed for about 100 jobs before he got the job that he has
Oh
now.
my gosh.
He has to be very direct and upfront about everything that happened and then trust the process.
Yeah.
And finally, somebody just recognized the strength and resilience that he has and gave him a shot. And it's been a real blessing for us. But it's not easy.
To
So
try to explain, if, I would imagine if I was interviewing someone as a potential candidate and they come in and they say, listen, I have a felony on my record. It's for fraud. I'm going to say, can you tell me a little bit more about it? To then try to explain what happened. It's not like a 2-minute elevator pitch.
no, but in Chad's case, it can be more like this. My wife was really involved in some real estate transactions and used my credit, and
Right.
they were
Good point.
fraudulent because that's really what happened with him. But it doesn't, the fact that you're saying explain a little bit more about it, that's pretty generous on your part because there's a lot of people that wouldn't even say that. In fact, there's people that didn't. They just said, okay, now you aren't a fit for what we
Mm,
want.
yeah, you're
So,
disqualified.
yeah.
Um, do you think there needs to be reform to prisons?
I think that we need to believe that people change and see the best in them. I think that's the most powerful thing that will change the system. Um, the people that I met were some of the hardest working people that came from the hardest circumstances. And there really are so many people that will come out and just need a shot. But the hard part is that there are people that also come out and they continue to hustle and they go right back. And I actually just had this conversation with a friend of mine who works in HR. And she said, if we are willing to give people a second chance, there's going to be times that it won't work out. But when it does, it's so gratifying. So as far as the system changing, I feel like we need to change as a society and what we expect. Like if we can see prison as a true second chance for people and believe that they can change their lives, the system will change. As long as we think that everyone's bad in prison, we give a lot of power to prosecutors and we kind of disempower the people that are in prison. I don't really get super caught up on, I don't like to give power to the government. Like the way I saw it was they got to decide how much time I did in prison and I got to decide what to do with it. And so when somebody like me or anybody else comes out and becomes the best version of themselves, the laws will change because the system will recognize, the people will recognize and demand change that the people that are going in are really good people that made a mistake and have the opportunity to change. So I want to see the system change, but I want it to be done through empowerment of the people that are in the system.
Yeah. You mentioned that you have an addictive personality since you were a teenager. At this point in your life, how have you filled that so that you don't become obsessed with certain things?
It scares me to death. If I'm being honest, like it is so hard for me. I mean, when I came home, the way that I handled it was that I didn't spend money. I was because I recognized money as a trigger for me. So I wore like the same clothing. I'm still very disciplined with my spending, a lot more than my husband or my kids. I just like they'll say, let's go on vacation. I'm like, I don't want to spend too much money. Um, I I stay connected to the community, people who are in recovery. That's one way that I do it. I also ask people to hold me accountable, like the people I care about. I'm like, if you see me struggling, I have a meeting with someone that I really care about today that is a good friend, and we're going to go to lunch, and I'm going to kind of throw some things at him that I have opportunities and like these are my areas that I'm concerned about. So help keep me on track. So I try to stay pretty self-aware of those challenges and ask people to tell me the truth about myself. So,
Are women treated differently than men in the prison system?
yes, but women act different than men in the prison system. Um, I think women, our struggle is codependency. So we get in this situation and there's a weakness to that. Men, it's gang activity, like they gang up. And so I feel like men get more opportunities because they stand stronger and demand them. With women, they're kind of turning on each other a lot.
Mm.
And men don't do that. So there's some differences between men and women. And I think because women, the connection they have to their children, there's a brokenness that is much deeper when you're in prison. And so that's why you do turn to friendships and these relationships that are so codependent. But I think that men and women are treated different, they act different, and I don't know how to fix it, honestly.
Yeah. I think this is more of a comment. I have a question for, maybe it's a question. I have a question for Portia. I was also sent to prison on a white collar crime totaling $8,000 in Arizona. My
Mhm.
question is, would Portia consider doing some type of collaborative work as our goals to use this extreme experience to help others are very much in alignment? Also, I too have seen having gone to prison as it being one of the most meaningful and positive turning points in my life. If you want to pass this along to Portia, I would greatly appreciate it. I guess if people want to get in touch with you, like this woman, how
Right.
can they?
So my email is portialauder@gmail.com and it's on my website. That's probably the easiest way to connect with me. And I am very, very busy, so I will get back to them when I can, right? And I also, social media, I get so many messages now that it's really hard for me to stay up on those. Like sometimes when I have time, I'll go through and go, oh my heck, that's 2 weeks old. I'm barely getting to it, you know?
Right.
But I love any time that I can support different initiatives that are trying to make a difference, I would like to. It just depends on what that looks like for me and with the time that I have. So,
Right. So the website, portialauder.com.
uh-huh.
Okay.
Yeah.
So for
And
those
they'll
of
find
you,
my email there and they can send me email messages and we can set up a time to talk. So that'd be
right,
great.
that's the best way for those of you wanting to get a hold of Portia. Do that. Email her, not me. That way you can talk to her directly. But if you email me, I'll pass it along to her.
Yeah.
Okay, Kathy, I'm just wondering if there are local prisons in the area that we live in. I don't know where she lives. What do these people need? Is there a way we can help inmates while they are incarcerated?
I get that question a lot and I love it, you know. Um, there were people that volunteered and came in and we loved them and we're so grateful for the service that they provided, but it's not an easy process. You have to go through getting badged and training and other things. I send them books because in the federal system, my book, they love my books because they're about them, you know. If people want to donate, they can do that on my website as well. And I send them to the BOP because they don't have tablets. They're available free on tablets across the country in state and county jails. There are a few county jails in state that don't have tablets. And so then we send paper copies in. And you can send other books. Like you could always donate books if you're really passionate about a certain topic and you want to share that. We love to read when we're incarcerated, and we're always excited when new books come into the library. So you can definitely send books to the library at different prisons and donate. But I would say, whether you're religious and you're praying for people or I have found so many people that really want to make a difference. And when they read what I write or they listen to the stories, they're excited and want to know how to support them. And I say, see the best in people as they come out. I don't really know. You can't send there's no hygiene things that you can send. You can't send food. Everything is so locked down when it comes to prisons that you really can't send things in that way. Even letters now, it's very structured and controlled. And so you probably wouldn't even be able to write letters, but you could look it up. You could look up how can I serve in prisons, and that's the best way to start is just kind of start down that path. So
Yeah. All right, this is our last question. What is your message to women in prison today?
my message is that you are so much more amazing than you can possibly comprehend. Like you have an important purpose on this earth and you have an amazing ending. And I get it. Like it is hard to be right where you are, but what you do now matters. The choices that you make and what you do at this time might be the most important thing you'll ever do. There is something on the other side of this, and every single step you take right where you are, if you prepare, the world will show up for you. And I believe in you, and I believe the world is cheering you on. That would be my message. I love those women and I believe in them. I know who they really are, and I want them to know who they really are.
So nice to have Portia back here, and many of you commented to me and sent me messages saying you follow her on social media because she's inspirational. In fact, many inmates, many of you who have served time, have written to say that her story has really inspired you. So thank you, Portia, for coming on. Now let's shift gears over to Brad Bradley. This was an interview that got a lot of you asking questions, a lot of you talking. It's been the number one show on Netflix. Amy Bradley, his sister, vanished while on a cruise ship back in the 90s. To this day, there's been no sign of her. Nobody knows where she is. I shouldn't say that. Somebody probably knows where she is, but publicly, authorities don't know where she is. Her family doesn't know where she is. And there's just a lot of questions about this. And Brad was kind enough to come back, and I have pages and pages of questions. We narrowed them down into many of you asked kind of the same thing, so we narrowed them into certain questions. Hopefully, we got most of them in. But I appreciate Brad for taking the time to be back with us here again tonight on Courtroom Insider. All right, so we are back tonight with Brad Bradley. Brad, a lot of questions came in, as I'm sure you've seen through your website and everything else. We'll just go through them one by one. For those of you that sent them all in, we tried to combine. Many of you asked the same type of questions, so we tried to combine them into similar things, and we tried to get to as many as we could. So, first one, Brad, is there a possibility the guy in the cabin next to you allowed her to leave by way of his deck? Crew members have keys to everything.
I mean, I guess, there's a lot of possibilities. The fact that her shirt was in the room that she was wearing when I went inside and the door had been opened, we know she came back into the room. But I suppose if someone, was working with the neighbor, they could have gained access through his room and like I'm sure you've seen, and something we didn't know until very recently that those partitions between the balconies can be opened or moved. So, yeah, I guess the simple answer is it's possible. But I think you know, if that were to be the case, he was involved for access, but I think it still doesn't change the three eyewitness sightings of Amy with yellow that morning afterward. So I don't know. It is. I guess anything's possible.
Right.
Hmm.
Nate, ask Brad about Amy's shoes. The documentary said her shoes were found on the balcony. Were other shoes missing from her belongings? If she left the room on her own, she wouldn't have left barefoot, would she? If she fell overboard, all shoes would be accounted for. Do you think the Bradleys have her belongings from this trip? Maybe friends could reassemble her outfits and determine what is missing.
Yeah, I mean, this is it's got to be the number one question I've answered. I don't know how many times on all the different forums. I guess the first thing is we didn't ever catalog how many pairs of shoes Amy owned. She brought several pair on the trip, and we don't know how many or exactly which ones, other than the ones that we still have. So there's no way for us to determine which, if any, are missing. I don't know that it's a factual statement to say that she couldn't have been barefoot. The two eyewitnesses that saw her go up the elevator, I've spoken to them recently, and they said the way from their viewpoint, they couldn't see her feet. So there's no answer there. The shoes that she was wearing that night at the pool party and I believe in the disco were kind of like a Birkenstock sandal. And those were, beside the chair she was sleeping on the balcony. But whether when she came in the room, took her shirt off and grabbed another pair of shoes, we don't know. There's no way for us to tell which shoes are missing because again, we don't know how many or which ones she brought. And when we got back to her apartment, we don't know which. Again, not having ever cataloged how many pairs she actually owned, we don't know which could have possibly been missing from her apartment either. So I don't know. I don't know. I wish there wasn't so much focus on the shoes. I'm not sure that has a whole lot of bearing on what happened, but I understand people's curiosities and I've been happy to answer it over and over again.
Right. I think about, when I go on vacation with my wife, I have no clue how many pairs of shoes she brings, So if she lost a pair, I wouldn't know. So I
Right.
see your point there. Someone's wondering if you've ever been in touch with Natalie Holloway's mother, Beth. She went missing in Aruba, and Aruba's part of the ABC Islands. Maybe she might be able to help.
Yeah, we have spoken to Beth Holloway many times. We actually did. I think she was a producer on a TV show called Vanished that actually did a story on Amy's story. So mom and her have spoken at length over the years, repeatedly, a number of times, and there's a lot of similarities between the case, just for the fact that Amy was invited to Carlos and Charlie's, which, as you know, was the bar that Natalie was in the night she went missing, on the same island, so same place, and the crew on the boat was interested in taking Amy to that bar. So, we've thought there may be some kind of connection or some sort of trafficking operation that runs through that place. I think I've heard that bar is no longer there on Aruba. Don't know, but yeah, the short answer is we know Beth Holloway and have spoken to her a bunch over the years.
I'm sure that's helpful to have kind of an ally who's been in a similar situation as you guys.
Yeah.
Okay, I got a lot of questions about this one, and many people were upset that I didn't drill you on this. I didn't get the impression from watching that the parents were upset about Amy's sexual orientation, but I've read online others felt that way. Were Amy's parents okay with it, given that she was gay? Do you think internalized or that she internalized or externalized homophobia, and that could have contributed to her death?
Okay, that was a multi-part question.
Right.
So I guess to start out, we didn't have a problem with Amy's sexuality. I mean, there was some surprise and I guess some confusion and initial, feelings about it from my parents' point of view. I never personally cared at all. That was, 3 years or more prior to this trip. It had been well gotten over. Nobody had any issues. Any stories about any contention between Amy and myself or Amy and my parents is completely false. And so, no, I don't know, internalization or externalizing homophobia. I don't know. I don't think Amy cared. We had her girlfriends over the house, spend the night. We had girlfriends go on trips, family vacations with us. And like I told you before, I think Amy had a boyfriend at the time. So, we loved Amy like we always did. And there was no issue there whatsoever. So people, are going to think what they're going to think. But there was none of that crap going on.
Let me follow up, Brad, because I've worked on these type of programs before where a producer will come and interview me about a crime story or something I've covered. And then when it goes to air, you can tell that they've left some stuff out, or they've played up other parts to make the story a little bit more juicy, a little bit more, I don't want to say sensational, but to keep viewers tuned in, where they'll play up a part that really they're playing it at a 7, but really it was like a 3 or a 2.
Yeah.
Would you say that's how you viewed the whole sexuality component to the Netflix docuseries?
Yeah, I mean, we all thought it was irrelevant. I mean, her sexuality, in our opinion, had nothing to do with her disappearance. And I think the time spent on that show discussing those issues, and again, they apparently interviewed her, the guy she was dating at the time, flew him out to Utah or wherever and interviewed him for 5 hours, completely excluded him from the story to paint a certain type of picture. And again, it was irrelevant. Whether she dated men or women or whatever, it had no bearing on what happened to her. And I think the time could have been better spent with some other pieces of evidence and information that weren't included in the show. But that whole thing is upsetting because obviously Amy can't speak for herself and tell everybody that we were as loving and as close a family as any. There were no issues at all. We were all, we all had great relationships. So again, it's frustrating that people think what they're going to think, and not a whole lot we can do about it other than to refute it.
All right. Do you think it's possible that Amy walked off the boat with Yellow, whether by force or on her own free will?
I don't think the free will option is there. I think Amy was, too smart to get off the boat when we're supposed to be getting off the boat shortly and go on some, mystery excursion with, a guy that she had just known for a couple of days. Again, I've touched on, people have asked a lot of questions about whether she was looking for drugs or whether we were talking about trying to find drugs. The answer is no to both of those. Amy didn't do drugs. We didn't do drugs together. We never talked about doing drugs. We weren't looking for drugs. So that whole part of the story about her trying to find drugs, I've never bought at all. I think that I don't think there was a whole lot of free will of anything going on with what happened to Amy. So I don't believe she walked off that boat by choice. If she walked off the boat with Yellow, which again, the eyewitnesses that state that she went up the elevator with him up to the Viking Lounge. The one eyewitness that wasn't included in the documentary that was inside the Viking Lounge that saw them come off the elevator and Yellow handed her a drink. Then the eyewitnesses from outside says, 10, 15 minutes later, whatever it was, Yellow comes back walking by them by himself. So I believe she was handed off to another crew member or other crew members that then took her down into the lower decks, and whatever happened from there happened. But again, I don't think she walked off the gangway on the land side. I think we discussed that before.
Right. Okay, another question. The military guy who saw her said she told him she was just, well, you kind of addressed this. She was just trying to score some drugs and now she's being held against her will. Was that a possibility?
Yeah, and then that's the only part of that guy's story, other than the fact he didn't tell us until 2 years later when it was too late, that I don't buy. Whether that was, some story that she had been fed to tell people as to why she was there, potentially, if that was her, in fact. But I don't believe, she's held in a brothel against her will for a $200, debt she owes somebody for drugs that she was apparently looking for. Amy, again, no history of drugs in her life. It was alcohol, like beer and cigarettes was pretty much it. So I don't buy that part of the story. So for whatever that's worth, that part of his claim has always kind of struck me a little bit funny.
Right. Okay, if she had been on the island for all these years, why wouldn't the police or government there say something?
I mean, I personally believe the police or government are involved in some of these operations. We've learned a lot of things and been told by a number of people that customs officials are in on things, harbor police are in on things, local police are in on things, and who knows about the government? These cartels that run drugs through these islands, get a hold of whoever they want to get a hold of to make sure that their operations go the way they need to go. So, I don't think you can trust local officials. Again, just an opinion I hold, to help with much when that stuff is, probably still ongoing all around those places.
I imagine there's been so many days where your family's like, who do you trust? Like, who
Yeah,
who do you go to?
yeah.
Okay. Was the man, oh, what was the main thing Netflix got wrong in their documentary?
I don't know that they got anything wrong necessarily. I think that unfortunately, and again, my intent from the very beginning has never been to throw any shade their way. We're very, very grateful for the job that they did in telling the story and gaining so much interest around the world. Um, I don't know that they got anything wrong. I think the fact that the thing was only 3 episodes just made it quite impossible to include a lot of important information. And again, I guess the whole thing about Amy's sexuality kind of took up a little bit too much time, in my opinion, and doesn't have anything to do with anything. I think that if I had to answer your question, not that they got anything wrong, but if they did get anything wrong, it was just putting that stuff in the documentary when there was a lot of other pertinent information that was a lot more interesting than what that was.
Brad, was this one of those things that they worked on for a few years, or did they come to you guys like last year and say, "Hey, we want to do this"?
Yeah, I mean, I think the whole project took like maybe a year and a half in total. I don't know that they were already working on it. Maybe they were. I don't know for a fact if they had already done work on it prior to coming to us to ask us if we would agree to work with them on it. Some of those interviews were like in the spring or summer of 2024. And then we repeated them a number of weeks later, I guess after they went and interviewed other people in the story, then they'd come back to us and do follow-ups kind of like we're doing now.
Yeah.
So I think the total project, and I'd have to look at, I'm just guessing, was probably about a year and a half worth.
Okay.
Mhm.
Why do you think nobody on the ship took it seriously when Amy first disappeared?
Well, I think the biggest number of people didn't know about it because it wasn't reported by the authorities on that ship. So I think there were a lot of people. In fact, I've heard some people say that they were on that cruise and never knew about it until after the cruise was over.
Mm.
I don't think there's a lot of people that can say that, but there's definitely a few that I guess weren't paying attention. But um, the I don't know what to say about what the cruise ship did or didn't do. I think their actions and or their inaction make them responsible and or irresponsible for the amount of time that passed between when she was first reported missing and the time that they made people aware with flyers, which I think was close to 48 hours after we reboarded the ship. So I don't know what the motive there was, and whether that's the right word to use or not. Whether it was intentional or unintentional, or whether they just weren't prepared for a situation like this, or whether they were protecting their liabilities, which I've always kind of long held that suspicion.
Sure.
So I don't know. I think there were a lot of mistakes made. There were a lot of things that could have been done that were refused or weren't done. There were things that we were told that were done that we found later weren't done, including the thoroughness of the initial searches that were done on the boat in the earliest and most crucial hours of following her disappearance.
Right. If Yellow or someone killed Amy on the ship, wouldn't the cruise line find the body? Or do you think it's possible they stored her body somewhere and then disposed of it in the middle of the ocean after the cruise ship left the dock? Sorry to be so morbid.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, I guess it's possible. I don't know if she were murdered on the ship, and her body was still there. Yeah, I'd assume somebody would eventually find it. If she were, and again, we don't know whether or not, she was taken off on that island, which I personally believe for a number of different reasons, or whether she was kind of stowed away and hidden until they got to the next island. There are a lot of unknowns. I don't think that she was murdered on the ship. We've got multiple eyewitnesses, from months to several years after her disappearance that are all very credible. And so I think, again, I go back to, I think she was taken down to the bottom of the ship. I think she was removed on the backside of that ship on the water side during the early morning hours and handed off to whoever was involved, on that island. So, and that goes back to the taxi driver, Deshi, who is no longer with us, but he claimed to have seen Amy that morning, come to ask him for the phone. We talked about that in our first interview. And then he came back to us and spoke with my dad and I when we went down 2 weeks later to search the island and hold press conference and all that stuff. And very sincerely told us that, she didn't fall or jump, that she's on that island. And if you could have seen the look in his eyes and the seriousness of what he was getting across to us, it was pretty plain to us that he knew something more, but couldn't or wouldn't share. So I don't think she was killed on the ship. I think she was removed for other reasons. And again, my strongest suspicion is that she was taken into some sort of sex trafficking type situation.
Have you ever thought about suing the cruise ship? Couldn't they be held responsible?
It's a short answer. We did file suit against the cruise line back about, I guess I'd have to look exactly how long it was after Amy disappeared. I think it was a little over a year following her disappearance, and we brought a suit for negligence. The suit was dismissed by the judge, who later recused himself from the case. Make of that what you will, because they said that we withheld witness information or certain leads that we had gotten. What most people don't know is that we supplied through discovery 87 pounds worth of paper files, which included every single thing we had ever learned or been told or found out, every single lead we ever got. So there was absolutely nothing withheld. And my opinion is that, again, I think the fix was in. They dismissed that case on a technicality that actually wasn't true, because they had every piece of information that we had. They based that on, depositions that we gave basically under emotional duress, trying to answer their questions hour after hour after hour after hour. I mean, I think I was deposed, I don't remember whether it was 13 and a half or 18 and a half hours worth.
Wow.
But that's a lot of questions and a lot of information that you try to basically go from memory. I mean, it wasn't like I had studied for a test. I think I got some names mixed up, and basically they used all that against us and got it thrown out. And then again, my mom witnessed the judge talking to the company's attorneys in a very friendly manner just prior to the dismissal. And then, shortly after the decision was made, that judge recused himself from the case. So, I've nothing I want more in this life other than getting Amy back is for that cruise line to be held responsible for what they did and didn't do.
And this question follows up with that one. Have you been back on a cruise, and would you go again if you haven't?
No, no, and no. The less I see a cruise ship, the better. It's obviously kind of a PTSD type thing. I don't have any interest in it. And I think if people knew what we've learned and what we've found out over the years about what goes on in and around these ships, they wouldn't want to either.
I know in the series they had the cruise expert on there talking about how, once you're in international waters, good luck. You're there. Are there any reforms or any mandates that you wish cruise lines had to follow?
I think first of all, it'd be interesting for your viewers to check out the gal I did an interview with named Katie Beck.
Yeah.
On Untold. She actually interviewed Jamie Barnett, who runs internationalcruisevictims.org on Monday, and I think it airs tomorrow morning.
Good.
She's going to have a lot more information to share. And she's much more well versed in what goes on on cruise ships and how many people have died or have gone missing that no one ever hears about, no one knows about. If you go to internationalcruisevictims.org, you can scroll for a fairly long period of time, all the different names and stories about things that have happened that no one's aware of. I think, I think I've heard recently that there are some sort of apps where you can, I don't know whether, I guess it's on your phone, or I don't know whether it's something that the cruise lines give you when you get on, where you can locate the people that you're with using the app. So I think that's a good idea, and that apparently has already been instituted. I think that the petition on change.org for Amy alerts is a really good thing. I wish it had been thought of and implemented a long time ago. And basically, it's kind of like, an Amber Alert when a child goes missing, to make sure every passenger on that boat is alerted immediately. Because, if you have a couple extra thousand eyes and ears looking around and listening, you have a much greater chance and opportunity to prevent what happened to Amy from happening. If more people had been aware that morning from the get-go, we may not have lost her. But I'm sure there's a lot of things I'm missing and not including here that I either haven't thought about or haven't studied up on. But yeah, I think there's a lot that can be done. But I don't think the amount of people, the people that those ships hire are from other countries and those islands. Um, and I think, and again, this is just an opinion that I hold, that the reason that they hire people from other countries is because our authorities can't do anything about it. If their employees are involved in crimes, they can't. They basically are protected by international waters and jurisdictional barriers. So I don't know. I think the laws need to be changed. I think there needs to be some adjustments to some of the treaties that are held between these sovereign countries and our own, so that when people from United States or people from any other country go missing in a different place, that our authorities are able to conduct an investigation consistent with what would happen here. And it just doesn't. It just doesn't.
I'm glad you brought up the Amy's alert. There were a few questions that came in about that. I honestly had not heard about that until some of you viewers sent that in to us.
Mhm.
Be sure you watch Katie's story tomorrow. Katie is an excellent journalist, Katie Beck from WTVR. And back when I worked in Richmond, we both worked the evening news. We were at competing stations, but
I didn't
she
know that.
she scooped me a lot. She's a good reporter,
Yeah.
and just a good person
Yeah.
too. Just a great person. So I look forward to watching that interview with the cruise expert.
Yeah.
Two more questions from our viewers. The first one: do you think Amy will ever be found?
I don't know. Obviously we hope that she is, but it's an impossible question to answer. I think chances are probably greater that she's not, given the amount of time that's gone by and the amount of balls that were dropped, in the early stages of the investigation and along over the years. So I think the odds are stacked against her and us in our ability to find her and bring her home. But we know there's not a zero chance of it. So we're gonna keep on pushing as hard as we can to make something happen. Um, you know, I think I'm used to the roller coaster of getting your hopes up and getting them dashed and getting your hopes up and getting them dashed. And I can't tell you how many times over the years that we've been on that ride. But this is another one, and we're kind of on we're ticking up for the big hill, and I'm hoping it's not, it doesn't end up the same way that we've uh, found it to end, many times over the years.
Right.
Um, so I don't know, and that's a tough question to answer whether I believe she'll be found or not. I have, a lot of hope towards that direction, but obviously, no idea.
Last question: what is your message for Amy?
Um, you know, I, my message to Amy, Amy, if you're able to see this or hear this, we love you more than anything. Always have. We'll never stop. We're never going to stop looking for you unless we're presented a reason that there's no reason to continue with it. But we're trying as hard as we can. Please don't give up. We won't give up, and we love you. And all we want is to get you back home safe and help you get through this. So if you're out there, hang in there.
Brad, thank you very much for coming back. Give people again the name of the website and the GoFundMe.
Yeah, well, the website is amybradleyismissing.com.
Right.
The tip line is amybradleyismissing@gmail.com. Our tip line to call and leave, a voice message is 804-789-4269 or for Amy. And then the GoFundMe, it's posted on my X page, my TikTok page. The links are in my bio there on both of those places. The Find Amy Bradley Facebook group is a really good resource to find all this information on too. And so, donate if you can, $1 at a time. This stuff that we're doing now and following up on these leads and all this computer work that has to be done, and it's not free, and we don't have enough to cover what is coming at us. So. The two volunteer projects that have gained some pretty good traction with the Project Miata and Project Bailey. Again, those links can be found on my pages in the Linktree bio thing. But thank you for your time, Nate. I appreciate the follow-up. I'm happy to do this anytime.
Thank you very much. Wouldn't it be incredible if they can somehow get some answers with all of this increased publicity? It's amazing what a little light and internet exposure can do in cases where people start to talk, or whoever knows something might begin to feel a little bit of discomfort because they know something, and then things start to come out. So wouldn't it be amazing if that does happen? Thank you to Brad. And I want to shout out newspapers.com. They are our sponsor of Courtroom Insider, and you can go on newspapers.com and read so many more details about this case. Back from when Amy Bradley disappeared, the original newspaper articles that were printed at the time, and the developments in the investigation throughout the years. As he mentioned, 27 years is a long time, a lot to cover. We didn't get to it all by far in this interview, and neither did the Netflix series. So thank you to newspapers.com for sponsoring us. You know what I didn't ask him? How did he feel about being named Brad with the last name Bradley? Man, I've talked to him twice now. I'll text him and be like, Brad, how do you feel about that? Especially if his first name really is Bradley. Bradley? That'd be something. I don't know if that's the case, but anyway. Brad, thanks for being here tonight. And thank you for watching tonight here on Courtroom Insider. Here's where you can keep track of what's coming up. I'm on Facebook, Nate Eaton Reporter. I also am on Instagram. I'm on X, Nate News Now. And there's our East Idaho News YouTube channel. Would love it if you would subscribe. And you can also subscribe to our family channel, Meetin' the Eatons. We have some fun content coming up. I do want to make it clear, yesterday on my Facebook page, I posted these photos of me in our home studio that we just put in. Jordan, my photographer here, helped put this in. We're just getting started. We're going to add things to this. It looks pretty simple now. We're going to add some things. Many of you thought that I was leaving East Idaho News and doing my own thing there at home. That's not the case. I'm not leaving East Idaho News. I will be here for a long time, probably forever. I'm just put that in at home so that I can do more, so that I can do more videos, so that I can do more interviews, that I can, I have a couple of ideas that I want to do with podcast type things. And it's going to be so nice if I can just walk into the basement and do that. Plus Erica, my wife, can come on, and so can the kids. And I'm not leaving. So sorry for those of you that were nervous. I got a lot of messages this morning that are like, you're leaving? No, I'm not leaving. Staying with East Idaho News. With that, we'll be back tomorrow for another Courtroom Insider. And it's a case that is just so haunting and disturbing, and one that I had not heard about until a few weeks ago. And we're going to dive in with the grandparents of the young man who murdered his dad, his dad's girlfriend, and his little brother in a cabin, and then drove away and lied about what happened. And until months ago, didn't tell anybody that he had done it. But the grandparents went to visit him in prison, and he confessed. And those grandparents are here. We're going to walk through the case. I have all of the evidence photos, the crime scene pictures. We'll show some of it, not all of it here, because a lot of it's graphic. But we'll dive into that case tomorrow night, 7 o'clock Mountain Time. Hope you'll tune in for another edition of Courtroom Insider. Hope you have a good night. Thanks for watching. I'm Nate Eaton.